And welcome in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head and Jack Belcher along with you on this Friday, and going to jump back into our conversation. We started a little bit earlier about baseball, as yesterday we did formally hear from Coach Paul Mainieri for the first time, being introduced as the head coach of the University of South Carolina starting in the 2025 season. And again, he is very long-winded. Gave some very long and detailed answers. Not a lot of questions that were able to get asked, but some good insight from him and where he's going to be leading this program over the next couple of years. But we also got the chance to hear from the assistants as well, and he talked at length about all three of his assistants, so Mainieri, Terry Rooney, and Joe Hendry, and what they're going to bring to the program and what he thinks of those guys up to this point. I want to start off with Mainieri. Obviously, local connection here, been here before, been here for a while. Somebody that up to a week ago we thought might actually end up becoming the head coach here at South Carolina, but now has decided to stay on staff as an assistant and the best paid assistant in the entire country at that. But after Mainieri's presser, he talked to the media and a little bit of media scrum and talked about the importance of building this roster from within. Let's let you hear what Coach Mainieri had to say.
You also want to make sure that you are building from within while you do that. The transfer portal, it's here, it's real. We have to use it to compete, but we also better make sure that we have the Cole Messinas and the Ethan Petries in there too, the guys that are homegrown that come in as freshmen and develop. Some develop faster than others, but we better have a really good surplus of high school players coming in here who as freshmen, maybe they get their feet wet and get a chance to play, but they're in your program, and by year two, they're ready to play for you. So I think it's super important that you're able to do both, that you got to win now, but you're also building those rosters with good quality high school players so that when they come in, you have a chance to have sustainable success. That's what Coach Tanner did. Coach Tanner had long-term sustainable success, and that is the thing that Paul Mainieri is going to want to do here too. He's going to want to win now, but he's going to want to develop long-term sustainable success, and that happens in recruiting, consistency, discipline, and great leadership. So I'm excited to be a part of that.
And I think that starts with, as we talked about a little bit earlier, the guys that you currently have on the roster right now. Now, the transfer portal is open. There's still opportunity for those guys to want to enter the portal if they want to. But again, we've gotten what seems to be the nod of approval from several guys, including Ethan Petrie, Kennedy Jones, and Blake Jackson, that they are committed to staying here with Coach Mainieri, and hopefully plenty more will follow suit with that.
Yeah, definitely. And like we talked about earlier, having the players, some of them show up that have been in Columbia for a little bit now. Showing up to the press conference yesterday was definitely a good sign. You had like Eli Jones there, Eddie Copper, Blake Jackson, who had already said he's coming back next year. Trying to think of some others. Dylan Eskew was there.
Lee Croy was there.
Yeah, Talmadge Lee Croy was there. There's probably someone else. Oh, Roman Kimball was there. Mm-hmm. So, and he was another guy who put out a tweet saying let's run it back. I think or let's get to work. So I definitely think player retention's big, and I think Mainieri and Paul Mainieri and Terry Rooney and John Hendry are all going to have a big part in getting that done. But it's also about, okay, who can we get out of the portal? And they've already gone after some JUCO guys. I know they got 3 of the top 10 JUCO players coming to South Carolina next year, and they landed Caden Gaskin, who seems to be someone that could really slot in at second base next year and potentially start. He's got, stole 41 bases last year. So they've got guys. Now it's just about, really fine-tuning the roster and making sure you fill every possible spot with the best talent possible.
Speaking of Mainieri, I do think maybe he didn't need to say this because I think that's going to rile people up a little bit more. But when, Coach Mainieri mentioned that, hey, I want to build this program for Mainieri to eventually take over whenever I'm done here in 5 years or whatever it may be. I think we tried almost kind of talking people away from that earlier on this week, like, hey, let's not worry about the succession plan. That's years from now. And I think he kind of re-sparked that flame a little bit by mentioning that yesterday.
He definitely did, and I think it wasn't the worst thing to say. I think
and I feel like I don't think he was specifically trying to say, when I'm done here, I'm going to give the program to Mainieri. I think he was like in a manner of speaking that just Mainieri happened to be the person that he was using there. Because here's the thing. Baseball is such a fluid sport, especially when you're talking about assistants. if this program is great for the next 2 to 3 years, Mainieri might get a chance somewhere else. And he may be hard-pressed to say no to whatever that chance is. So there's no guarantee he's going to be around at Carolina whenever, Mainieri is done here.
Exactly. And I think, I don't know how long Paul's going to end up being here. I do think as soon as he, wins a champion, if he does win a championship at South Carolina, I feel like that's when riding off to the sunset and
Sure.
call it good. But, look, if South Carolina wins at Omaha, next year or something, it wouldn't surprise me if he just turned the keys over to Monty. And
after a year, you think he would do that?
The way he sounded, like he said he's got a 1-year plan. So I don't know.
Now, if it's somebody that had never won a national championship before, I feel like that might be a little bit of a stronger possibility. I feel like having already won a national championship, I don't think he needs that mic drop necessarily.
No, he doesn't.
So, and hey, if they won the College World Series next year, that's fantastic. That's only going to set the expectations for the next 4 years after that even higher. I think he's here for at least 5 years. I don't, unless, again, the neck thing acts up or whatever, but according to him, he's in good shape. Unless that happens, I feel like he's here for at least 5 years.
He definitely probably will be here for 5 years. And that's just spitball looking, thinking of it. I definitely think he'll be here for the full extent of his contract. I don't know. I don't know. I did like the way he spoke yesterday. He said a lot of interesting things yesterday, kind of alluding to a lot of things, like with Mainieri and his plan, for how long he could be here and stuff. And Mainieri also did say this will be the final stop of his college coaching career. So regardless of how it ends up, whether he's here the whole time, whether he gets fired, whether he wins a championship in a year and is done, this is it for him. So I definitely think he's going to lay it all out on the line. And I think maybe, sticking around the 5 years would be really nice, just because then you have, I don't know, it gives you more incentive to come here. I feel like, no disrespect to Mainieri. I think he's a great coach, great coordinator, recruiting coordinator. People love the guy. I just think when you talk about, okay, I want to come play for Paul Mainieri versus, I want to come play for Mainieri. I feel like because of Paul Mainieri's resume and stuff, it dwarfs anyone in comparison. But I do think over time, Monty's going to be able to, further help solidify his case. He's also going to have, a letter of recommendation now from, one of the greatest coaches of all time. So he's in really good standing, and I think staying at South Carolina was the optimal decision, outside of the fact that he's making, $550,000 per year now.
I was going to say, I don't know what his coaching salary would have been at the Citadel, but I don't imagine it would have been $550,000. So I can understand the enticingness of wanting to stay here. And again, if we are, if this program ends up being what Mainieri says this can be, you have the opportunity to go to Omaha, which again is something he has been able to do as an assistant, obviously, but something he's not done in a very, very long time.
Did you track it yesterday, seeing how many times Mainieri mentioned
I meant to do that, actually. I was talking about that with Mike in the Central Hour yesterday, and because I was listening to it and recording it and all that kind of stuff, and I lost count, so I should go back and check to see how many times. But he talked about Omaha a lot, mentioned championship. The culture, tradition kind of go hand in hand there of this program. So he hit all the high notes I kind of expected him to hit multiple times. And it's so funny how pressers can almost become predictable depending on who it is and what's going on. But yeah, he definitely nailed some of those high notes I thought he was going to.
Yeah, I don't remember hearing the word Omaha a ton, but I also didn't hear the phrase, we want Omaha as much as you do. So, hey, I like it. I think the hype video for next year when, you hear Mainieri's voice in there will be pretty cool. But yeah, look, the plan, the fact that he's here to win now and get the job done, it is, I think the way he went about saying the things he did was impressive. But keeping on Monty, Monty did say a lot of good things yesterday. I think I asked him about, the fact that, I asked him what he thought about the players quickly buying into what Mainieri was, putting together, but also the fact of, they were supporting for Monty to become the head coach and what all that meant to him. And look, that's the reason he coaches. It's not about wins and losses. It's about the players. And
sure.
Yeah, that's the big thing that I can take away from this entire press conference. And we obviously didn't hear from John Hendry yesterday just because he's coaching at Virginia right now.
Yep.
The quote of the press conference for me, it's not about us. It's about the players. It's about them, and that's something that I've heard repetitively now with all three of these guys. And I think this is the right ensemble, the right trio, right quartet that's going to get this team back to where they need to go.
Yeah, hopefully so. And again, Mainieri at least brings you some continuity to hopefully hang on to some of those guys that were already on the roster there. And again, some of them voiced their support last week with wanting Mainieri to become the head coach, but this is kind of the next best thing. And again, you bring in a guy with a high pedigree and great resume like Paul Mainieri that's been there and done that and can get this program back to where it needs to be. That hopefully that it's just a 1-year turnaround. To where we're playing, maybe in Omaha this time next year instead of watching from the sidelines. But overall, I think the press conference is great, and again, I think Mainieri hit all the high points of what he needed to hit, and to say the things that's going to get this fan base excited. And I think people are. Certainly, the reactions that I saw coming away from the press conference yesterday, that there's plenty of reason to believe in what he's going to do here as a head coach.
Speaking of Omaha for a second, I know we texted about this.
Yeah.
College World Series starts today.
It does.
Do you have a pick for who could go all the way?
I was debating on that, and I'm still not exactly sure because this is a pretty loaded Omaha.
It's 4 ACC, 4 SEC, right?
Yes, it is.
Oof.
Which is the first time that I believe that's ever happened.
Yes.
Think on that.
Yeah.
We'll come back to it towards the end of the show.
There we go.
We'll make our picks for who we think's going to run the table. Run the table, but end up taking it home in Omaha. Because some compelling teams, obviously plenty of teams that South Carolina's seen, including some surprises like Florida, which D1 Baseball had a really good breakdown of their numbers. They shouldn't be in Omaha based on their numbers, but somehow they are.
Yeah, they're getting hot at the right time. That is the name of postseason baseball, getting hot.
So we'll talk about that plenty. We'll also hear from Coach Rooney coming up in a little bit. Coming up next, Chris Clark going to check in with us from day 4 of Shane Beamer football camp as the month of June. Certainly a busy one with all the camps and all the official visits, so we'll hear from him coming up next. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. He is Jack Veltri from Gamecock Central. I'm Tyler Head on your Friday on the Game.
All right, guys, coming up, we'll have the GC Takeover Hour brought to you, as always, by our friends at Firehouse Subs. Hit up Firehouse Subs right now, either on the app or online at firehouseSubs.com, and order your Rapid Rescue to go. It is by far the easiest, most efficient way to get your lunch. Avoid the wait. Order online. They're going to have that sub waiting for you right there on the shelf in a bag when you walk in with your chips in the bag as well. You want to try something new? The Barbecue Cuban is back. Get ready for slow smoked pulled pork, honey ham, melted Swiss, spicy pickle chips, chipotle sauce, golden barbecue sauce, all, as always, on a toasted sub roll. If you want to try it, this was National Brisket Day earlier this week. Try my favorite is brisket, add bacon. But whatever you like, whatever your preference, I promise you there's a great sub for you at Firehouse Subs. Head on over again, firehousesubs.com. Best way to do it, download the Firehouse Subs app now.
Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head and Jack Felcher from Gamecock Central hanging out here in the Herndon Chevrolet Studios. Wes and Chris, the past couple days, been out at day 4 of Shane Beamer football camp. Going to check in with Chris Clark now on the Love Chevrolet phone lines. And Chris, before we get into stuff going on at camp, we've been talking all morning long about Coach Mainieri's introductory presser yesterday. You had some very good thoughts on Twitter last night about your takeaways from it. Well, just kind of to summarize, what did you think of what you heard from the new head coach yesterday?
Hey, Tyler, Jack, good to see. I didn't know Jack was going to be in today. This is a pleasant surprise.
That's right.
Maybe
Jack,
I did
Jack Tavius playing the backup role today.
Calling in the reinforcements. That's actually the A crew. Wes and I, the backups are getting the day off. But I did think it was a fascinating press conference. And look, I know, and I put this out on Twitter, X, whatever we're calling it nowadays, yesterday, alongside my thoughts. I know at the end of the day, the most important things, wins and losses, right? If we look back in 3 to 4 years and Paul Mainieri's had great success, people probably aren't going to be talking about the press conference. If he does not have as much success as everyone hopes and envisions, people aren't going to be like, well, he had a really good press conference. But the reason I think it was interesting is because, press conference can reveal philosophies. And I think you can get an idea of what coaches maybe plan to do, especially when it comes to addressing some of the things that have been identified as having held this program back in recent years, right? And so I think Gamecock fans, when they hear things about accountability and demands and consistency and how Paul Mainieri, a very, very experienced coach who's seen a lot and been in a lot of huge games, I think when he talks about those things, that is music to fans' ears, right? Because when you look back at some teams in the past, there's always been a lot of talent, even years that haven't been as successful as South Carolina has hoped. There's always been talent on this team, right? I think having him say, and really this goes along with what we've been talking about this week, guys, having him recognize, hey, this isn't some total rebuild. I'm not going to be a coach who's going to come in and say, well, once I get my guys in here, we're really going to flip this thing around. South Carolina is not that far off. They made a regional this year, won some games in the SEC tournament. They made a super last year. This is a program with a rich history that, even though they haven't been back to Omaha in quite some time, they've been close in that span, and they're always kind of not that far away. And then I think just talking about the defense and the attention that's going to be put on that and the attention that's going to be put on, above all else, driving in runners, right, which was a problem, especially in the NCAA regional this year. So I think, it's not just words. I think it kind of reveals some philosophies. And he got very specific and I thought was very honest, which, whether it's philosophy or talking about his staff or why he came to South Carolina, I thought it was interesting stuff that I think was probably something that fans like to hear.
Chris, it's Jack. I just wanted to ask you, I'm reading one of your tweets here from your thread, I guess, yesterday, and there was an interesting post you had comparing Mainieri giving a similar vibe to that of Ray Tanner, and I have to agree with you. I definitely think they kind of see eye to eye on a lot of things, and I just was wondering, could you expand a little bit more on kind of what you said on Twitter for those who maybe not have read what you were putting out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Jack, that, Gamecock fans who have followed the baseball team for a long time, if you think back to Ray Tanner's teams, particularly those ones from 2010 to 2012 that made it to Omaha 3 times and won 2 championships in a row in 2010 and 11, were they talented? Oh, absolutely. I mean, Whit Merrifield, Michael Roth, Jackie Bradley Jr., Christian Walker, the list goes on and on. But they also had some guys that didn't really make it that far in pro ball. It's not like they were just loaded with MLB players. I mean, Brady Thomas, right? Robert Berry, guys like that. But they were just so mentally and physically tough. You just felt like when you played South Carolina, it was going to be really hard to win. And I think part of that was just because they never seemed out of the fight, and they were just probably the toughest team in the country at that point. And I think that was something that, when Tanner was in the dugout, if you go and talk to some of his older players, I mean, there's a lot of respect there, obviously, but he could be a tough coach at times. And I think that's something that if you kind of check around now and check around the last few years, it seems like there's a desire to maybe get back to that a little bit, right? And I think you even expanded out to a couple other things Mainieri said, talking about being on the same page with Monty Lee in terms of philosophy. I think pulling in one direction is something that's good, right? But I just think that, hearing Mainieri talk about being ready for the big moments, ready to make the big pitch, get the big hit when you really need it, those are things that I think from a mentally tough standpoint, you have to instill, right? You got to have the right kind of guys, which I think South Carolina does have a lot of those type guys, and you try to continue to recruit more. But it's something that has to go, I think, throughout your program. And I think that's something that Mainieri really wants to instill in this group. And if you think about those past South Carolina teams, that's what they had, right? They had the type of team where, yeah, maybe Matt Price walks the bases loaded with nobody out, but then he gets 3 straight strikeouts and they're going home and a winner, right? So I did get some shades of like old school Gamecock baseball listening to Mainieri, and I think that's something that Gamecock fans would love to get back to.
Let's switch gear over to football camp as it is day 4 of the Shane Beamer football camp. I know early on in today's session, what have you seen so far with the guys in the trenches today?
Well, yesterday when y'all talked to Wes, it was mainly skill position guys, right, out at the 7-on-7 camp, looking at a lot of receivers. Today it's kind of flipped a little bit. I've spent the majority of the day out here at the O-line, D-line camp. Sterling Lucas, Travian Robertson, Lonnie Teasley. Sean Elliott's even hanging around here, guys. He just can't seem
Can't get away from it.
The offensive line, yeah, he's a lineman at heart, played D-line in college, longtime O-line coach. So, not a in 7-on-7, not a wealth of tight ends out there today. So he's over here milling about too. So there's a pretty good group of young offensive linemen and some young defensive linemen too. There's some guys from the 2025 class, but even going to the 2027 class. I mean, there's a really interesting prospect here, guys, that we've been watching that has a pretty significant Gamecocks tie. And he's a local product now, having moved here. Julian Walker, who now plays at Dutch Fork, 2026 edge prospect, and a really good-looking player just on the hoof. He's the son of South Carolina strength and conditioning associate Jameel Walker. Jameel Walker was the head guy at Arkansas under Sam Pittman for a while and is now here under Luke Day as an assistant. So his son Jameel is out here working out and is a pretty good-looking guy. And then there's some young offensive linemen as well, who I think either have offers or have a chance to get an offer. Malcolm Gaston from North Augusta, 2026 guy. Miles Glover out of Georgia is another young guy. So just getting a good look at some young linemen here. One-on-ones are about to start pretty shortly. And so I'll have a better sense of how some of those guys look, and maybe we can talk about them next week a little bit as well.
Wanted to ask you a little bit of a more general perspective question, Chris, because not everyone has is there at these camps and stuff.
Yeah.
2-part question: what do you look for as a with your job in terms of going to these camps? Like, what are the big things that you're looking to see, and then kind of just describe what it's like, kind of being at these camps for those who don't get to go.
Yeah, I mean, as for what it's like, it kind of depends on the day. Sometimes you have general prospect camps. Sometimes you have these camps that are split, 7-on-7 going on at the indoor and on the practice fields, and then over at the stadium is typically the lineman camp. Other days it's just prospect camp where you've got a variety of guys from quarterbacks to skill positions to linemen. And then you have a specialist camp, too, that will actually be taking place tomorrow. Joe D will be working some guys out. But typically a good many kids here, right? And the vast majority of them are not guys that are South Carolina's level, SEC, Power 4 players, but there are some. I mean, there typically are some guys that show up to get offers that earn them. There are guys that show up that the staff likes. So really we're just trying to look at guys and kind of make our own evaluation, say that kid looks good. Who is he? Kind of what's the deal there? and then, trying to pay attention to guys that the staff is paying attention to, and then just kind of track those recruitments.
Well, Chris, we'll let you get back to it, and we'll check back in with.
You did it too, Tyler.
I know, I do it. It's okay. We all do it at some point. We'll let you get back to it, and we'll check in with you and Wes coming back on Monday.
Thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate you having me.
Thanks,
that
Chris.
is Chris Clark out at day 4 of the Shane Beamer football camp. I can't imagine understanding the chaos of one of those things. I've seen, the videos and stuff, things that go on out there. There's a whole lot to take in, and I can't imagine having to cover it the way those guys do.
Absolutely not. I am so much happier being here and just not being out in the heat of all things that is out there right now. It's a lot going on, it seems like.
And I don't know if you know this, Wes hates when people complain about the heat. Like, that is his biggest pet peeve. Like, it's hot. We know it's hot. Don't say anything about it. So if you ever get the opportunity to mention the heat around Wes, take the opportunity to do it, because you just know it annoys him.
Oh, absolutely. I definitely will.
We'll jump back into the baseball conversation. We'll hear from Coach Terry Rooney as he spoke to Jay and Elijah on the halftime show yesterday. Some of his thoughts as he comes into South Carolina, and we'll touch on Jack's conversation with him on Gamecock Central as well. That's coming up. It's Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on The Game. Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Jack Belcher along with you on this Friday, continuing to look through the coaching staff here for South Carolina baseball after being introduced to Coach Paul Mainieri for the first time yesterday in his presser. Also got to hear from Coach Terry Rooney on the postgame show yesterday with Jay and Elijah. We'll get to a clip from that in just a minute. But you, before anybody, actually got access to Coach Rooney the other day and posted that video on Gamecock Central last night. Went back and listened to it. We're not going to have to worry about him falling asleep on the job. Seems very well caffeinated and seems very energized.
Yeah, there was a great quote that I'll pull up here in a second. But my thoughts on it, first off, he is definitely the right guy for the job. I would trust him as a head coach eventually at some point. He knows what he's talking about when it comes to just the game, but also his desire to win. And I think that's such a turn on for South Carolina fans, is the fact that this guy is invested. And here's the quote that he had said to me in our one-on-one exclusive interview, which you can check out on Gamecock Central's YouTube page. Every morning, the caffeine is going to be rocking, okay? It's going to be on high octane, and I'm going to wake up every single morning doing what I can in my part to help this program win another national championship. The way he was talking, like, we're supposed to be unbiased, reporters of the game and stuff.
Sure.
I would run through a brick wall for this guy. Like, the way he spoke was just very, precise and, attention to detail oriented. And again, the big thing with him is that, it's not about us. It's about them. And that's in reference to the players. And he's big on player development. And, obviously he's the recruiting coordinator, so he kind of has to be. But he said a lot of good things to me the other day.
Yeah, and for one, just seems like that high-energy guy, maybe that's because of the caffeine that can really, get players juiced up and be excited. But I thought it was really interesting to hear him just kind of talk about his relationship with Coach Mainieri. And, again, he had just gotten back to LSU this past year, working there for the first time since he had worked there with Mainieri in the past. And then when Mainieri calls him up and says, hey, I'm taking this job at South Carolina, you want to come? It didn't seem like there was any hesitation that he wanted to coach under him again.
Absolutely not. I think, that was one thing I did have to ask him about, was that, he had a good thing going at LSU, I think, being back there for a second stint and working not in an on-field role, but as the recruiting coordinator under Jay Johnson and company at LSU. And look, I mean, it was he said he really enjoyed being back for his second stint, and he potentially thought he'd be back longer. But when a guy like Paul Mainieri calls you, you're someone that he considers to be a mentor and his old boss. I feel like when you get that call, it's like I think in most cases, if anyone was in that situation, it's hard to turn it down.
Let's hear a little bit of what he had to say yesterday on the post-game show with Jay and Elijah, where he comes in here as both the pitching coach and the recruiting coordinator. Here's him explaining his role on this team for next year.
My position is interesting because you look at the growth of college baseball, it's not, I would say this, it's kind of unique because there's not a pitching coach recruiting coordinator combo. It's, hey, you're going to do pitching, and that's 95% of what you do, and then everybody else does recruiting. And to be honest with you, I don't want that. I want to do both. I think I do have confidence in my abilities over the years. I know how to balance everything. I think John and I, Hendry, working together is awesome. We're going to do this together, he and I. And I think that does, from a recruiting standpoint, allow me to get on the road, and do some things. Because, listen, you're a great coach. You've got great players. I mean, let's be serious, and I understand that. But these guys that are here, we've got a great pitching staff here. We've got a really good group of returning guys. We've got a really good group of new guys coming in, so I'm excited about it, but I do think the chance to come back with Paul is incredible. It really is. And it's not something I knew was going to happen. I'll be honest with you. It really came out of nowhere. Yeah. Understanding he and I both live in Baton Rouge, and we did live in Baton Rouge. So, I would get phone calls or texts from him. We stayed in touch, obviously. I just thought it was another text or another phone call, and it was not, obviously, about 3 or 4 days ago. So, but I'm excited. I cannot tell you how excited I am to be here. I understand the tradition of Carolina baseball. I understand what Coach Tanner built. I understand what Monty has done here, and not only here but in his career, what he's done to keep this thing going these last couple weeks, and I can't wait to get working with the staff.
And again, it didn't seem like there was any hesitancy to want to work for Coach Mainieri again, but that is an interesting position to be the pitching coach and recruiting coordinator. And he mentioned this, and Mainieri touched on this in his presser as well, that there's going to be times where he's going to have to be out on the road doing some recruiting, and Hendry's going to kind of step in to fill that pitching coach role when he can't be there for practices or whatever it may be. So it's going to be interesting to see how he balances that. But again, he's got a good reputation as an assistant, going back to his time when he was with Mainieri all the way back in the early 2000s to being a head coach at Central Florida and then getting himself back in to the ranks in the SEC as an assistant, where he's bounced around to several different places, most recently at LSU this past season.
Yeah, the good thing about Hendry is, and Mainieri brought this up in his press conference, because that was definitely a question I think some people had, was, okay, how did you kind of come up with John Hendry as, one of your assistants? And the thing is that I didn't even know this, is that Hendry, he's the director of player development at Virginia. That's been his role last 3 years. It's not an on-field role, but during the summers, I think Mainieri said Hendry works with pitchers in the Cape Cod League, I believe. And that's kind of how he, got his reputation as being, an assistant pitching coach at South Carolina. And, a lot of the coaches around the country have said that this guy's going to be the next great assistant coach. And I asked Terry yesterday, speaking to him again at the press conference, kind of, how do you go about teaching John? Like, what do you plan on teaching him? And it's really not about what he's going to teach John. It's about what John can help bring to the table for Terry. And I think that's an interesting dynamic, because these two are going to be working together as peers, but at the same time, Terry's also got a lot more experience. But when Terry's on the road recruiting, I think you can trust John Hendry to go out there and handle this pitching staff accordingly. He's a younger guy, and I feel like he's going to fit in very well.
Yeah, absolutely. And for all the accolades that they gave to him, it seems like he can be one of those guys that can quickly become one of those assistants that gets talked about a lot, and who knows, could be a head coach himself in a couple of years. And again, has been a part of a really great pitching staff, or a really great staff in general up there at Virginia, that is once again in the College World Series pursuing a national championship. So a welcome addition to the team. And I said this the other day, it can't be understated how important it is to have 3 head coaches on the pitching staff, on the coaching staff in general, with Mainieri and obviously Terry Rooney having prior head coaching experience, and then Hendry coming from a really good program there in Virginia. So a very experienced staff, a staff that's been around, that has seen the highest of highs in this game of college baseball, that hopefully does what they can to get South Carolina back there.
Yep, they definitely have the experience to get the job done, and we'll see what happens. But I definitely do think this is, like we've said countless times now, this is the right staff, in my opinion, at least, to get the job done and get them back to Omaha. It feels that way. We haven't gotten to speak to Hendry yet, so I'm interested to see what that's like when we eventually do, once Virginia's done with their College World Series run. But, I mean, everything these guys have said, they've hit the mark.
Speaking of the College World Series, things get rolling in Omaha later on this afternoon. We'll take a look at the final 8 teams remaining and see who our favorites are going to be to win the College World Series out in Omaha. That's coming up. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. He is Jack Belcher from Gamecock Central. I'm Tyler Head on your Friday on the Game. Welcome back in. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Jack Belcher along with you for a few more minutes here. College World Series gets rolling later on this afternoon. Virginia, North Carolina in the first game at 2 o'clock. You can watch that on ESPN, followed by Florida State and Tennessee in the nightcap at 7 o'clock. I thought it was funny, Mainieri yesterday in his kind of opening riff there was talking about Omaha, where, of course, they won the national championship at LSU back in 2009 at the old Rosenblatt Stadium, which, I hadn't thought about Rosenblatt in a long time, but, there was a certain charm to that stadium and a uniqueness that, I get why they've gone to the new field, Charles Schwab Stadium now, but, man, there was something special about Rosenblatt, and I do hate that it's no longer around.
Me too. Obviously, I've never been to Omaha. Would love to go someday. That'd be wonderful. But I think Rosenblatt, seeing the videos of it when, Whit Merrifield's, the hit down the line, the walk-off and stuff, that place was energetic. And you look at the next year, 2011, when they went back-to-back and Jackie Bradley Jr., catches the ball in center field and he chucks it into the stands. It feels like a lot more of a modern ballpark. And, you needed that. I feel like the amenities need to be.
I get it. Right.
If you're going to be there for 2 weeks, you got to make the ballpark as good as possible.
Right.
But, and it's also a good financial investment in case you ever, like the Big Ten tournament's there. I learned that this year.
Yep.
It's interesting. So, but yeah, it's definitely, those ballparks are definitely completely different.
Well, Carolina fans could care less what ballpark it's going to be played in. If South Carolina can get back there, they will be very, very happy next year. But unfortunately, got to sit on the couch and watch another College World Series go by this year, which, as we talked about, 4-4, 4 ACC teams, 4 SEC teams squaring off in Omaha to see who comes out as national champions. Quick rundown of the teams still left standing: Florida, Florida State, Kentucky, North Carolina State, North Carolina, Tennessee, Texas A&M, and Virginia. The double up on states here is so interesting. 2 from Florida, 2 from North Carolina. And then, of course, you have the singles with Kentucky, Tennessee, A&M, and then Virginia. And man, when you look at the numbers of this, and again, D1 Baseball is a really good breakdown of the numbers here, Florida shouldn't be here, right? Like, Florida, for one, nobody thought they should have been in the tournament to begin with. They were the 11th team that got in over the likes of teams like College of Charleston, but they've absolutely made the most of it, and they are back in Omaha once again.
What's the better name for the better nickname for Florida here? Oma Chop or Floma?
Ooh, I did see where they did that for all the teams. I guess Oma Chomp is probably the best one.
I think it's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Florida
Kind of works.
They're an interesting team, man. They, I remember when I was in Gainesville about a month and a half ago, mid-April, for South Carolina series with Florida, and the Gamecocks just looked like the better team for most of that weekend. And obviously, the third game of that series is a little, tightly more contested just because Florida's offense is really good. And that's the big thing with this team. Florida, it has a very good offensive approach. Jack Caglione, Tyler Shelnut, Colby Shelton. There's other names I'm probably forgetting here, drawing a blank on, but Dale Thomas is another big name. There's one other name I'm forgetting, but they've got a good group offensively. Pitching-wise, Jack Caglione on the mound. I think Liam Peterson's starting today for Florida. And then you obviously have Brandon Neely, who is definitely a gem out there. And look, they ran the table. They went into Oklahoma State, won that regional, and then they went to Clemson and swept it. So I get why they shouldn't be in this position. A lot of people did not think they deserved to. At the end of the day, they got in, and they proved they belong.
And look, that's a program that's just historically, especially under Kevin O'Sullivan, a really good tournament team. And it took them winning that last weekend series in the regular season against Georgia to really solidify themselves in the NCAA tournament. But once you get them in there, they're a dangerous team, much like LSU was at the SEC tournament a couple of weeks ago, and obviously been able to ride that all the way to Omaha. It's really hard to pick against Tennessee this weekend. I mean, they're the number one team in the country for a reason. All the numbers back it up, and we obviously saw it up close and personal when South Carolina played them. They are just good at literally everything, and if they are standing tall with a national championship at the end of this weekend, I'm not going to, or not at the end of this weekend, the end of Omaha, I'm not going to be surprised by it.
Yeah, it's always easy to think Tennessee's going to win it all, and I think this year's team is a lot different than the one that was unbelievable 2 years ago that lost in the Super Regional to Notre Dame. in a year where I think that is what you can call an utter failure, not winning a championship. I think this year's team's a lot more relaxed. They're not as cocky and brash as that team was 2 years ago. I mean, you would love to hate those guys 2 years ago. That's the way I look at it. And now it's like they're kind of a good story. Like, they're a great team, and they've got a lot of talent. Tony Vitello is doing an excellent job at Tennessee. Josh Elander and company. But I don't know. It is tough to pick against them. Florida State's a tough draw. They can really score at a high pace. I'm not sure. I mean, these matchups can go literally either way. I do think someone's going to beat Tennessee at some point this week. It's just I don't know if it's going to be day one, but it is possible.
I'm really kind of looking at Kentucky, and that's a team that we saw not too long ago. Their ability to manufacture runs, stealing bases, playing small ball, moving runners around, all that kind of stuff. In a situation like this, I think that could be a key element to them maybe making a very deep run in Omaha and maybe even come away with the national championship when it's all said and done.
100%. It's an interesting thing to look at because Kentucky is pretty unique compared to most teams. Like you said, small ball is kind of their brand for how they play, and that's going to be interesting. Against a team like NC State that has a lot of sluggers, they can pitch pretty well. I don't know. Kentucky's a dangerous sleeper team to go all the way. This is their first trip to Omaha, believe it or not. So I wonder how BBN's going to show out for this week and all that. They seem to be doing pretty well with the Jello shots so far.
I did see that. That's my favorite part of Omaha.
Oh, man, that seems awesome. But I don't know. Again, it really just depends. These are all East Coast, Southeast type of teams.
Sure.
So I wonder who's going to have, like, the biggest turnout and stuff. I mean, maybe, like, Tennessee or, I don't know.
Because of the Hendry connection, should we be rooting for Virginia to win?
I mean, it only helps, his case. I mean, at this point, what difference is it going to really make? It's not like he's the recruiting coordinator, so it's not like, oh, he's missing out on all this. I mean, why not? Go out and win a national championship in Virginia, then come here, and you can tell all the players about how to win in Omaha.
So if you're picking one team, who do you think walks away with the championship?
Oh boy. I don't know. My sleeper team is going to be Kentucky. I think Kentucky or NC State could really go a long way. If I'm going to pick a team to win the national championship, gosh, it's hard to pick against Tennessee. I'm gonna go A&M. I think A&M, Texas A&M, team we haven't talked about yet.
I say they feel like they're flying under the radar.
They are. No one's really talking about them as much, and they had such an impressive win in against Oregon to go to Omaha, last weekend, and they are, again, back when they took 203 from South Carolina, that was the best team I thought South Carolina had played all year, and I still do feel that way. That is a dangerous team, and I do think they have what it takes to go far, despite not having Braden Montgomery.
I'm going to have to go with the favorites in Tennessee, but we'll see what happens. Again, things getting rolling later on this afternoon at 2 o'clock on ESPN. Jack, appreciate it. We'll see you in here next week.
Yeah, appreciate it, my man.
That'll do it for the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Halftime show with myself and Terry Ford up next here on The Game.
Our friends over at Integrated Media can help bring your home into the modern age, because when you choose Integrated Media to install your smart home systems or do anything that you need at your home or business from an audio-visual standpoint, they're going to help you be amazed by what your phone can do. Utilizing your smartphone, you can control your lights, your thermostat, your sound systems, TVs, security cameras, and your alarm. Again, all from the touch of a button. Go check out what they can do at integratedmediainc.com. They've got reviews there for you. They have a lot all about their services. Again, security and cameras, TV installations, audio, video, home theater, and complete smart home solutions where you can control everything in your home from the touch of a button. 803-948-8327 or go to their website, integratedmediainc.com. Michael, Nathan, their team, I can personally attest to the fact they're awesome. They've been to my home, integratedmediainc.com.